I was a homeschool mom for 17 years and had, listened to some of Kent Hovind's teachings. And so I brought my kids down here to see Dinosaur Adventureland. So we came to see Dinosaur Adventureland, and I met Kent and his son, Eric.
You attended the sentencing, and help us set the scene a little bit. So you attended the sentencing in 2007, and was the courtroom?
It was packed. It was packed. It was just, standing room only.
And Hovind supporters and movement, they often pull this quote. They say that, the judge said what Kent Hovind did was worse than a rapist. When you read the transcripts, Eric Hovind, very nice young man who I've talked to many times, he said, they're treating my dad like a rapist. So I said, okay, well, that's where the phrase came from. And people kind of just, got a little bit twisted. Did you hear Judge Rogers say, or do you remember, Kent Hovind's crime makes him worse than a rapist?
Well, that's actually the difference between me and everyone else who was in the courtroom that day. So even though it was a standing room only courtroom, I was the only one who was taking notes. None of the reporters were taking notes, none of the observers were taking notes. So I took notes, and I have a blog, so I actually wrote in very great detail what happened at the end of each day. And you're like a teacher and a professional. I have a couple of exact quotes here. I think it's important that we have the words correct.
Okay.
Because as far as I understand, Kent is currently saying that the judge accused him of being worse than a rapist.
Signed affidavits, which I've never seen, who swore to this.
Right. And so those 8 affidavits, as far as I'm aware, were all sworn statements that were done 8 to 9 years after the fact, and whereas my documentation was done the day it happened. And so that's what makes mine different. I wrote a couple letters, one to Eric and one to Kent. They are similar, but not exactly the same. And, just reminded them of how I met them. They both remembered me. They both wrote back. They both remembered me. So I just pulled out the quote from the transcript here where the judge says, I received letters from many of you. And at this point, she's speaking to everyone who's in the audience, just the people who came to observe like me. I received letters from many of you expressing the view that sometimes those convicted of heinous crimes are subject to less time than Mr. Hovind is facing in this case. This is a serious case, serious charges, serious conduct. Make no mistake about it. By your conduct in this case, Mr. Hovind, in my opinion, you dishonored the men and the women in our military. You dishonored your fellow Americans, and you've dishonored the Constitution of the United States. And that is the only thing that she said regarding this particular section about a heinous crime. Justice has to be blind, Eric stated, as he agreed with the judge sentencing his father to a sentence worse than that of a rapist. He said that this whole trial was really meant for Kent to be made the example of, and that Joe didn't need to be used in that same way. Eric was the only one who ever used the word rapist. The judge did not. At no time did anyone in the trial ever call Kent worse than a rapist.
Did you hear back from Eric?
Yes, I did. So Eric agreed that nothing had been tampered with in the transcript, and he agreed with my statements of what had happened with the 2 character statements that he had made about both of his parents, and that he was the one who said that the sentencing was worse than that of a rapist, but that the judge had never said that Kent was worse than a rapist.
Judge Margaret Casey Rogers sentenced Pastor to many years in prison for what doesn't even constitute a crime, and yet is on record for saying it's worse than a rapist. She said at my sentencing, your crime is worse than rape. We paid for the court transcript, and it had been altered. This